You're on.
Hello and welcome to our session today. I'm just allowing people to join in the webinar. It takes a moment or two for people to fully join the session. So we'll just give all the delegates a few more seconds to join, and then we will start with the main session. I can see people are still arriving, so we will just allow a little more time as people enter the webinar. Welcome to the session today as you join us. I think that might be most people coming in who are going to join live. I'll just one more second. I think that's all. Hello and welcome to this ETOA session on visitor spend in Europe. I'm delighted to be joined today by Anna Borduja of Maybrian, Shana Zand of We Travel, and David Edwards, who many of you will know as our resident tourism stats expert. So a very warm welcome to all three of you for today's session. I look forward to hearing from each of you very shortly. Just before that, a little bit of housekeeping. The recording will be available afterwards, so do look out for that in your inboxes. Feel free to ask any questions via the Q&A facility, and hopefully we'll have a little time to cover some of those after we have heard from the speakers. And so we do have a lot of information on visitor numbers to Europe, and understanding how much they're spending, though, is a lot more complicated. And we're going to hear a different perspective from each panelist today to help us put the complete picture together. We'll hear first from David on why this is such a difficult area and why there are so many barriers to consistency in getting the data. Then we're going to hear from Shana on pre-departure spend and platforms. And finally, we'll hear from Anna on in-destination spend. So very much looking forward to hearing from all of you. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, David.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel, and welcome everybody. So indeed, I'm going to be talking for the next 10 or so minutes about measuring tourism expenditure. And at first you might think, well, that surely is quite straightforward, but in fact it is rather tricky. Why is that the case? Well, a number of reasons. We have to think about the units of measurement. We have to think about definitions, and we have to think about the approach that is being taken to measuring tourism expenditure. So let's take each of those three in turn and begin with the challenges that we face when talking about tourism expenditure relating to units of measurement. And purely to illustrate this, I'm going to use data from the United Kingdom for inbound tourism spend, but frankly, the same would apply for any destination. So our very first chart then looks at long-term trends in inbound visitor spending to the UK each year from 1988 through to last year. And this is literally just the data as it was published each year as history passed, so what's called out-term prices. And if we look at that and analyse the data, we would find that the average annual growth over that period has been 5.3%. But as we all know, especially at the present time, there's something called inflation that erodes the value of currency over time. So let's keep the red line, which is out-term prices, and introduce the blue line. So here, this is inbound visitor spending to the UK in what is called constant prices, so having adjusted for inflation. Now remember, in out-term prices, we were talking about annual year-on-year growth of 5.3% over those 30 plus years. But once we take inflation into account, that growth falls to 2.7% in what is termed real terms. So very often when we are talking about tourism expenditure, we do want to look at trends over time. So it's really important to take account of inflation. One of the other things we very often want to do is compare a basket of countries to see how they are performing over time. Now, of course, many countries use their own distinct currency, so that adds another layer of confusion and challenge when we're thinking about the units. The United Nations World Tourism Organization tends to convert everything into US dollars. So that's what I've done here. It's exactly the same base series adjusted for inflation of inbound visitor spending to the United Kingdom, but this time converting to US dollars using the exchange rate that was applicable in each and every year as it passed through. And if we do that, what we find is we'd be talking about annual growth in US dollar terms of inbound visitor spending to the UK of just 1.7% compared to that 2.7% in sterling. What is this telling us? Well, it's telling us that exchange rates change over time, and it's also telling us that the pound has lost quite a lot of value against the US dollar over the last 34 years. So units often pose a bit of a problem. Now let's move on to definitions, and rather than having a chart, I'm afraid it's going to be quite a wordy slide or two here. But what counts as tourism expenditure very much depends on how we define tourism. So let's borrow what the UNWTO says we should be thinking about. So tourism expenditure refers to the amount paid for the acquisition or consumption of goods and services as well as valuables for own use or to give away for and during tourism trips. It includes expenditure by visitors themselves as well as expenses that are paid for or reimbursed by others, for example, tour operators. So what's a tourism trip, we need to ask? Well, that's quite straightforward according to the UNWTO. A tourism trip is a trip that's taken by visitors. So brace yourselves, we need to think about what is and what isn't a visitor. Well, a visitor, according to UNWTO, is a traveller taking a trip to a main destination outside his or her usual environment for less than a year for any main purpose, business, leisure, or other personal purpose, other than to be employed by a resident entity of the country or place visited. A visitor, domestic inbound or outbound, is classified as a tourist or overnight visitor if his or her trip includes an overnight stay, or a same-day visitor, otherwise known as an excursionist, otherwise. So we can see a simple little word like visitor has a very long-winded definition. Finishing this definitions session off, inbound tourism, this is quite a straightforward one. It comprises the activities of non-resident visitors within the country of reference on an inbound tourism trip. And inbound tourism expenditure is the tourism expenditure, whose definition we have already seen, of a non-resident visitor within the economy of residence. So if we use all of those definitions, then we find that according to UNWTO, receipts from inbound tourism to Europe stood at an estimated $548.6 US billion last year. And that compares with about 584 billion US dollars back in 2019, without having adjusted for exchange rate changes and indeed inflation. So on then to perhaps the more exciting discussion, the approaches. How do we go about measuring tourism expenditure? Well, there are two or three broad approaches that we can talk about. First of those is surveying those who are making the expenditure. We could call that a demand side data approach. Then there's monitoring the revenue of businesses within the sector. We could think of that as a supply side data approach. And then, more applicable to inbound than domestic spending, we've got the third approach, which is measuring payment card use, or what we could term transactional data. So let's briefly think about some of the pros and cons of each of those options. Beginning with demand side survey data, where we quiz those who are actually undertaking those trips. So one of the big pluses here is that we can use survey questions to ensure that we are complying with what constitutes a tourism trip and that we are truly measuring tourism expenditure. Another big positive of this approach is that we can analyze spend data against lots of other information that we collect at the same time as we're doing this survey. For example, we can ask questions about length of stay, the purpose of the trip, the group size, all manner of things. So we can really start to get a rich understanding of the behavior, the characteristics that relate to and correspond with the tourism expenditure. We can estimate both trip-specific averages, but if we weight our survey data, we can also use this to get overall expenditure by inbound visitors within a particular destination. So those are some of the positives, but there are disadvantages. There are disadvantages to any survey that I'm sure you will all know about. But the risk here is, of course, that respondents will simply forget some of their expenditure, especially if it is expenditure that they undertook before the departure for the destination. Plus, many international visitors may really struggle with currency conversions, so it's not all plain sailing. But it's worth noting that a few years ago, the UK's Office for National Statistics undertook a really fascinating study. They interviewed people using the standard question, asking them about how much they had spent during their trip to the UK. And then they took a subsample aside and took them through a really long, detailed set of questions about their expenditure to figure out whether or not when people were given lots of prompts, they gave a different overall figure to that rather simplistically asked question. And the good news was that those who had initially overstated were almost matched identically by those who had understated. So the overall average was in fact not different at all. What about the supply side approach to measuring tourism expenditure? Here we need to bear in mind that visitors spend money on a vast range of goods and services when they're traveling for a tourism trip. And that, of course, means that many different types of business accrue revenue from tourists when they're spending money. This means that estimates are needed for the proportion of revenue that comes courtesy of tourism expenditure, whether that's for hotels, restaurants, railways, jewelers, supermarkets, or EV charging devices. Some of those types of revenue, we might think, oh, that's easy. It's going to be pretty much all tourists. But others, of course, is going to be a mix of people who aren't spending money as a tourist and those who are. But perhaps the main challenge when we're thinking about this approach to measuring tourism expenditure is that data is often not in the public domain, and that which is in the public domain is often available with a really quite considerable time lag. On then to this transactional approach. So this approach faces the same challenges as supply side data if we're simply using point of sale data, but it has greater potential for measuring spending in a country on bank cards registered outside that country if we're looking for a proxy measure for overall inbound visitor spending. One of the challenges we need to be aware of here is that we need to consider how representative any particular card type might be of overall inbound visitor expenditure within that destination. So what's the market share? But also we need to consider whether or not that particular card's market share is changing over time, because again, we're very often interested in the trend. And if market share is changing over time for a particular card, we might draw false conclusions about the overall tourism expenditure trend. And thinking again about our definitions, not all expenditure on foreign registered cards will be tourism expenditure. And again, taking a UK example here, since the start of 2021, 161,000 Hong Kong residents have moved to the UK on what's called a British National Overseas Visa Programme, but many of those will be still using their Hong Kong registered cards for transactions in the UK, even though they're not here as a tourist. So it's a challenging jigsaw out there of data. And with that, I will hand back to Rachel and we will hear from the other speakers about some of the ways we can indeed fill in some of the pieces of the jigsaw.
David, thank you very much. It's always really interesting to start off on a general level when we think about these subjects, because it's a lot more subjective than one might initially think, isn't it? It's very, very interesting. So Thank you for that. And we're going to move on and now get a little bit more specific. I'm really pleased to welcome a speaker from one of our newest members, which is We Travel. So Shana, thank you so much. We're really pleased to have We Travel on board as an ETOA member, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. I am not going to share my screen, mostly because my computer doesn't want to let me. So I'm going to chat with you and hopefully I can share some really insightful information. Very quickly, because we are new, my name is Shana. I'm based here in Toronto, Canada, but our business is based in Europe. I come from We Travel, so we are a booking and payment platform specifically for multi-day travel businesses. That's what we focus on. And we have over 5,000 clients globally who use our platform to make it easier for their customers to book onto their trips. So today, what I'm going to do, with our clients, we conducted a travel trends survey at the beginning of 2023 to understand and learn a bit more about different travel trends that are happening globally in all different kinds of sectors. So I'm going to give you a bit of a high-level overview of the information that we've learned and what's happening this year, what's kind of coming next. And so what we're learning from these different operators. Most of the businesses we work with, we would consider small to medium-sized businesses. We are starting to work with larger ones as well. So this is insights from what they're seeing from their customers, and then some additional information that we've gotten from other reports as well. So I hope that this is helpful for you. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know, as well as we will absolutely, and I believe it is available already to you all, but we will happily share our travel trends report with you. It's absolutely complimentary, so that you can dive in a little bit more, as I'm just going to kind of give you a high level today. And I will try to keep it short and sweet. So let me get started. I'm going to go by different categories that we found really interesting and take it from there. So the first one I'm going to talk about is age range and who likes to travel. So what we are seeing currently right now is the largest growing age range of groups traveling are millennials and boomers. And not that this, I think, is overly new information or different than what we would expect, but these are the largest growing groups. So kind of the 30 to 45 and 61 plus is what we're seeing that are growing the most currently this year with our clients. And our clients, like I said, are based globally. Majority of them are within the Americas and Europe. So not as much in the Asia region right now. In Africa, we're just starting to grow. So just to give you an idea of where our clients are coming from. We've also seen that females are booking in record numbers. Many operators are saying that female bookings are up 10% from the pre-COVID era, specifically on multi-day trips. So lots of females booking on, more so than ever before. A few big trends we saw. So first one I'll go into is installment payments. So 80% of our respondents say that travelers are booking with at least one installment, with an average actually being four installment payments. Their travelers, their customers are saying that this is becoming a necessity and not so much a nice to have. They are requiring, especially with inflation, it's becoming a necessity to start paying things off as you go. So more so than just paying a deposit, but having kind of a set payment plan for your customers is something that is becoming ever more important. I'm sure you all see this when you even just go to buy something online, to buy furniture, to buy clothing. I went to buy clothing the other day and I could make 4 installment payments of, I think, $11. So this is becoming an ever increasing trend across all industries, but now even more so with the travel industry. Customization. More than 60% of our respondents are saying that customization is a necessity as well, and another must-have. That their customers are saying, well, if we are going to be spending this money and we are going to be going to this destination, we want to ensure that we are doing everything we want to do, and not just a set tour that you have specified. And it's not to say people don't want to do that, but customizations are becoming more important. So people, travelers are willing to invest more into ensuring that the experience is exactly what they want within the destination that they want it to be in. Sustainable travel. So specifically Americans, we found within our travel trends report, are willing to pay more for sustainable travel options. And this was actually according to the European Investment Bank, and we just included this information within our report, that they are also booking a lot closer to departure date with much smaller group sizes. We do believe that the booking closer to departure date will start to adjust as we are coming out of the last few years. And this will change. People will start booking well in advance again. But we're still kind of in that phase of people not being sure what's going to happen. And so they are still tending to book closer to that departure date. I'm going to get a little more into the technology. I'm going to talk about destinations and timing, and then I'm going to get more into the technology and payment side of things, which is what we specialize in. And then I will hand it over. So destinations and timing. Based on our 5,000 plus operators currently using our platform, Italy is a top 10 destination in Europe, while Spain was one back in 2019 in terms of European destinations. Again, I don't believe that either of those would be surprising, but just to reiterate, we found that October and November are top booking months. Although we expect that general trends will go back to include January and February, along with the above, specifically with Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It's quite big in the Americas. And so November always tends to be a top booking month. But we do believe January and February will start to see those trends kind of coming back as well. As well as September being one of the largest travel months, generally speaking, globally. Shoulder season continues in popularity. I know for myself, I love traveling in shoulder season, especially to Europe. My Canadian bones don't take well to really, really hot weather, even though it is 30 plus degrees in Toronto right now, and has been for the last couple weeks. But I love a good shoulder season. So, if I'm going to Europe, looking at May, looking at September, October, that is becoming increasingly popular, as well as because of just flight prices over from the Americas are incredibly high to go to Europe this season due to the demand. The 5 types of travel that we have found are the most popular, we would say off-grid, culture-centered, which a lot of tours do happen to be, nostalgia-focused, so kind of feeling like a kid again, wellness, and company retreats. And this is per Booking.com's report on travel trends. And we found this very similar with our own clientele as well. So getting into kind of the technology and payment side of things, customers are really expecting everything to be connected and streamlined. From booking to payment to customization, the more simple it is, the more likely customers will be to actually complete the booking process. And making sure it's bookable online, whether it's on your own website, whether you're working with an OTA, an agency, whoever it may be. We always say as an operator, you want to focus on what you love to do, and that's to create incredible experiences for your customers. So using technology is a must to streamline the admin work, the payments, the back-end requirements, the, let's be honest, not such fun activities. And Europe is only increasing in popularity. So really important that you start to look at technology as a way to streamline your processes so that you can continue to keep up with the ever increasing demands. And I do want to add in a note that, you know, I've been talking about technology a lot lately, obviously coming from a travel tech platform. But I think one misconception is that it's incredibly expensive. And don't get me wrong, there are platforms that can be expensive. However, many platforms and many different apps that you can use to help support your business, not only do they connect and speak to one another, they can also be virtually free or cost very little. So do not think, I think the most expensive part of a platform sometimes is taking the time to integrate with it, to learn how to use it appropriately. And then once you do that, it's kind of that short-term pain for that long-term gain. And finally, payment options. So globally, there are many different ways to make payment, especially in Europe, I have found, coming from Canada. There are so many local payment methods and local currencies that, you know, it's an expectation of customers to be able to pay the way that they want to pay with the currency they want to pay with. So offering customers the chance to pay where, when, and how they want, and this also goes back to the installments, needs to be a part of your booking process. You know, trip prices have continued to increase on average by over 10% over 2019 per our clients. So offering your customers and your travelers the chance to pay the way that they want with the method that they want is going to be one way of increasing, you know, clients coming back to you and ensuring that they continue to work with you. That is it for me. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope that that was helpful to everybody, and I will hand it back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Zaina. That's really interesting. I would just point out, WeTravel's Trends Report is indeed available on the Insight Hub. I know you were wondering if people had access to it. Yes, it's at etoa.org/insights. So you will be able to find the report and download it on there for free. And I think it's a really interesting point that you make, though, Zaina, about the tech platforms having something to add with regards to spend and general traveler insights. We're finding that more and more. So I'd like to move on to someone who I know will definitely agree that tech platforms have a lot to offer. So we're going to move from one of our newest members to one of our newest partners, which is Mabrian. Anna, are you able to switch on your camera and join us? We are pleased to welcome you to your first webinar. And I know we will plan more later in this year. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from you, Anna. So we will move over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Rachel, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in our first webinar in ETOA. So today I want to share with you some insight based on spend data. But before, I would like to explain for those of you who don't know Mabrian what we are doing. Can you see my screen? Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Anna.
Perfect. So in Mabrian, we provide travel intelligence services to the destination worldwide and also to other companies in this industry. And we do that by analyzing multiple data sources. We work with big data, almost real-time data, and our strength is in combining social data with transactional one. As you can see in my slide, we have huge amount of different kinds of data in order to provide valuable insight and also information about visitors' behavior during the full travel cycle. From the dreaming and inspirational moment when our future visitors just start to look for the information, prices in order to choose what will be the next destination for their vacation, we already can understand what kind of information they find. And also from this data, we can actually measure and evaluate the demand, future inspirational demands to the destination. Once they actually decide where to go and book flight tickets, from this data, we can understand our confirmed demand. And in this case, to have this information on time, we can prepare it accordingly. From this data, we can understand from where our visitors are coming from, how long they are staying at the destination, when they will arrive, what kind of visitors we should expect, if there are more families, couples, if they come for business or for leisure, Also, from the booking and searching patterns, we can understand what will be the right way for our marketing campaign, how to optimize a marketing campaign in order to decide what will be the best timing for each one of the targets. Once this destination, we continue to analyze the data, and we understand actually what profile of the visitors we have in terms of estimated age or gender, what interests they have when there's a destination, in terms of accommodation preference or tourism product or attractions. We know actually this by analyzing social media, we know what they share in their personal account. Additionally, we analyze spend data to understand which markets spend most of the destination and also on which categories. Or from mobile data, we can actually identify the mobility patterns of these visitors. To complete this cycle, we analyze social media and review platforms in order to understand how our visitors evaluate their visit and the services provided at the destination. And this is very important, not only in order to understand the satisfaction level of the visitors, the customer experience they have actually at the destination. That is very important also to destination in order to know where they should to improve. But it's also very important information, because this information will find our future visitors when they will be in this moment of dreaming and inspiration, looking for the information and opinion of other visitors. So as you can see, very complete information about travelers' behavior at the destination. And we also use all this data in order to help destination to measure and also compare their performance in terms of sustainability. Very important and very complex issue. And now, today, I want to share with you some insight that coming from spend data, one of our data source. In this case, we are using MasterCard data, is our partner for this data source. Is true what David said, that is complicated. We don't have to find a right provider because there's not a perfect provider for this data. But working with one of the biggest bank company can help us to understand the main trends in terms of spending at the destination. The data that we are going to see today is analyzing spend patterns and spend evolution in London. And we analyze the period from May 2022 to April 2023. In some of the insight, we also will compare this data to the same year, to the same period of the previous year. So let's see what we can see here. Let's see if we can see if there are any change in the spending, if the visitors that we have in this period are spending more per month, per average per month during the analyzed period or less. So from what we can see, we analyze here the average spend per card holder per month. We can definitely see a downward trends. The spend per card holder is decreasing. And in order to see what are the main reasons for that, we also added to this analysis, the analysis of the average length of stay, also based on the same data source. And as you can see, it's really clear correlation. One of the main reasons to the decrease in the spend per card holder is a shorter length of stay. We can definitely see it here. If you compare the first month of the analysis to the last one, the average decline in the spend is around 11%. Let's see if it's a common trend or is something that can be seen only in London destination. For that, we will analyze also other destinations. Again, we will use the average spend per card holder on early base for this analysis. And from this analysis, we can see that the highest average spend per card holder is in London destination, followed by Paris. However, we can see a very common trend for all of the destinations. It's a decrease in the average spend from the last year. And the decrease is quite similar between all the destinations. It's around between 16 to 17%. And the reason for that, as we have seen already from the previous slide, one of them is, of course, shorter length of stay, but there's also some other reasons that we can see in general, that there are higher control in the spending due to uncertainty that we can see, and also inflation in the world. And also the reduced saving because of the last year boom in travels. In terms of seasonality, the share of spend by months during the analyzing period. What we can see here, the clear spikes during the summertime, the summer holidays, June, July, and August, and also winter holiday during December. However, the first months of the year show the lower share of spend that actually gradually start to increase during the beginning of the spring. In terms of markets, here in this case, we are analyzing the ranking of the markets in terms of economic benefits they provide to the destination. Also here, we wanted to compare if there are some changes in this ranking. From what we can see, the main market, United States and Germany, were on the top last year, and also this year remained in the same position. However, Switzerland and China, they're moving down from the 3rd and 4th position to the 5th and 6th, replaced by Netherlands and Italy. Another very important information, visitors from Russian Federation. We don't have this data, of course, because of the conflict. And it's not because we don't have now the visitors from Russia Federation in London. It's because MasterCard stopped operating in this market due to the conflict. If the previous slide shows us information about the ranking of the markets that provide more economic benefits to destination, these slides actually can help us identify the markets from where we have visitors who spend most at the destination. So here we actually analyze the average spend per cardholder and also compare this spend with the previous year. So from here, what we can see is the market that used to spend most at the destination per visitor, per cardholder, visitors from Russian Federation. But we have this data only for the 2022. The following markets are China and Switzerland that show the highest spend per cardholder. The only one market that show an increase in the average spend per cardholders are Chinese market, American market, and Netherlands market. All other markets show the same trend, decrease in the spend, average spend per cardholder. I can highlight Switzerland and Belgium with the highest decrease in the average spend per cardholder with more than 30%. And to compare the same data that we analyzed in the beginning, we also analyze the average spend, we also analyze the average length of stay and the evolution of average length of stay of those markets. And here we can see again the same trend. All the markets decrease their average spend at average length of stay at the destination. Besides the only one, the market, the visitors from Holland, they maintain the same number as in the previous years. And it's actually the only one market that show an increase, the highest increase in the average spend per cardholder. Before we analyzed the evolution of the spend between different markets, and now I would like to show you the share of the spend between different categories. This is very interesting information in order to see how actually the spend is distributed between different categories and businesses at the destination, and also the evolution of this data can help us identify an important trends in the market. So from what we can see from this analysis of the last year, we can see an increase in the categories as restaurants and accommodation and decrease in the grocery stores. And it's very interesting trend because after the pandemic, we have seen totally opposite trend. Because of the preference of the visitors to stay more in the holiday rental properties, in order to avoid the human concentration in the hotel, we have seen that this was a reduce in the spend in accommodation and restaurants, and at the same time was increase in the grocery stores and professional businesses. We also have seen that during the first year after the pandemic, the length of stay is increased in the destination. However, this year we can see totally opposite trend that may make us think that maybe we are coming back to the trends and habits of pre-pandemic period. And last but not least, one part of our sustainability dashboard analyzed the economic aspect of tourism as a destination. There we try to analyze the benefits that actually destination has from the tourism, and also the distribution of these benefits between different categories, businesses, giving a special way to the local economy. So in this chart, what we are trying to see, we're trying to see the share of the spend in local versus international merchants. As you can see, it's vary a lot from one category to other. When we're talking about local businesses, we can see that main categories are entertainment and restaurants. However, for the international merchants, we can see the higher spend in categories such as accommodation, home goods, and retail. So this is all from my side. I hope you find it interesting. I just want to mention that we have a lot of other study, and we continue to share new study in our social media and also blog that you can definitely turn to see if you can find some interesting insight. And of course, you also can contact us directly for any information that might be useful for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I would also mention that some of Mabrin's reports are on the Insight Hub already. As a partner, they have a separate category on the Insight Hub. So if you're looking specifically for Mabrin's reports, you can look under the Mabrin category, and some of them are on there. And we will be adding to that, won't we, Anna, as our partnership develops. So thank you very, very much for that, Anna. Some really granular things on there. And so we do have some time for questions and answers. So do please type in the Q&A if you would like to ask a question to any or all of our panelists. I have had one that was submitted prior to the session, which is actually from our colleague Tim Fairhurst, who is our Director of Policy. And I think it's a really valid point. One thing that certainly Tim spends a lot of his time doing is demonstrating the value of inbound tourism, often to policymakers, etc. So what we're trying to understand is total spend per origin market, say particularly places like the US, and that can be a real issue, trying to find the total amount that they've spent sort of from the get-go to leaving on their final day. And I just wondered if any of you had something to say around how we might get to that, or the closest thing we can get to that. If anyone, David, you're unmuted. Do you wish to say something?
I guess I would say that the survey approach is certainly a way of understanding that. So again, it's easier if you're thinking about one market rather than the collective of Europe, because at least you can say, well, we know how this was done, we know it's consistent or not over time. But certainly it's very straightforward, for example, in the UK's perspective, to measure how much visitors from the United States spend here through the International Passenger Survey. So that is quizzing them when they leave the territory. Absolutely, that comes with a caveat that they may have forgotten some elements of their spend pre-departure, but the questions are composed in a way that tries to prompt people to remind them of all of the different types of spending that we are talking about. I think what I would say is there is no perfect solution to solving that problem, but it certainly is a problem that we need to get as close an answer to as we possibly can.
Yes, and Shana, I know obviously on your platform, people are not just buying the outbound flights and accommodation, they can also buy their activities. Do you think, are you able to get a pretty good proportion of that when we're thinking about total spend, do you think?
For the for inbound in particular, we're probably not the best for the UK market as of now. So I would definitely go with what David is saying. We're still building that up. We do get the whole tour as a package. So that does give us a full kind of overview. So it's not just, like you said, it's not just one particular activity or flight. It's a little bit of everything. But we can definitely give you the numbers that we have for the UK. It wouldn't be an overall, it would be an estimate of based on the amount of operators we work with. This is what we see through our platform right now. But we're still building ourselves up in Europe and working with more and more operators as we go. So we're growing heavily, but still I wouldn't say enough for a proper sample quite yet.
We're getting there.
Yes.
Good. Anna, there's actually a slight extension to that question that Tim's listening in, and he has added a little bit to that, which I think is probably relevant to you. He was asking about tools for understanding the dispersal of the spend, so point of sales data. Can you see that in your information, when in your data, can you see that level of detail about different points of sale?
Not in our product. We are working with MasterCard, and sometimes we can make some specific analysis, tailor-made report that can analyze, can make the granularity higher. We can analyze some specific neighborhood, and the sales point there.
One thing I think also is quite interesting, which is probably for another webinar though, is being able to combine card spend data with mobile phone data. I've heard people sort of being able to do that in the future. Is that something you might be able to do in the future, Anna?
We actually combine this, of course, different sources, but this what we are doing actually with Mabrian. We analyze different data sources because it's not a perfect data source. Each data source will provide us information from some specific perspective. In order to have a more complete information, clear to reality, we need to analyze different data sources. So we analyze mobile data in terms of mobility partners and also combine with spend data.
Yes, and I'm thinking of something perhaps probably more for Shana. You were talking about pre-departure spend and the trend for splitting up into installments and late cancellations. Is that causing a problem for your clients? Because that can cause quite a lot of cash flow difficulties. So I'm thinking, really, is it a problem for your clients? And also, is it a problem for you with regards to measuring the spend and putting it in the right bucket, as it were?
We haven't actually found it an issue for our clients, and that's mostly because, there's always a deposit date and there's always a full payment due date, right? And the full payment due date is to cover, for example, if that operator has to make payment on anything, and usually, generally speaking, 2 to 3 months out, you generally need full payment. So the payment options or installments are well outside of that when you need full payment date. It's just more that, clients or customers like that automated, so they don't have to think about it. And they don't want to just pay a deposit and then make full payment. Full payment is a large chunk of money to give all in one shot. So sometimes when you're paying it off in installments, it feels a little bit better kind of mentally to yourself. And so using a platform that helps you, and it's like anything, I know there's Afterpay, there's Affirm, there's all these different systems that do it for outside of travel, or Uplift that does it within travel, but it's just setting it up so that it's easy. It just automatically does it for your clients. You actually end up receiving the funds a little bit faster as opposed to deposit and full payment. You're actually kind of receiving them in little chunks. We don't tend to find it difficult to track because we'll track it once full payment is made. But you actually get your funds a little bit faster as opposed to waiting to that full payment date, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. That's really interesting to hear, because of course we've spoken on many of our webinars about having to adjust to post-COVID trends that are here to stay, and that one comes up as one that is not going away.
Absolutely. And it's not going away for so many industries, not just the travel industry. So it's something to get used to. Yeah.
Indeed. Do please type your questions into the chat. I've got quite a specific one for Anna here from Cindy. She was just wondering what professional services would include in your slides where you were talking about spend by the different categories. If you could give a couple of examples of what might be in professional services, she was curious.
I will need to check it, because, each case is different. But when we're talking about professional services, this is a list of, of the services that is included, under this category. But unfortunately, I can't share it right now, exactly what kind of professional services there are. But this can be, for instance, services of lawyers, and any other services that can be professional.
Yes, I suppose it's quite heartening that the travellers are not engaging lawyers in destination. I think generally we can hope that. David, I am just thinking here, so you spoke at our recent event, the Destinations Exchange, and you had a slide there. I'm thinking about the increased costs of living that people are facing and where they might cut back. And you had a slide showing some research from our colleagues at ETC, the European Travel Commission, about what travellers might cut back on, and the number one thing being shopping, as opposed to experiences, which is clearly very encouraging for most of our audience. And I'm just thinking about that as a trend, and when we're thinking about measuring spend, do you think we're going to see significant cutbacks next time we survey these people?
So there are different things going on. We've talked a lot and heard a lot today about perhaps spend still going up, but in a sense that is because it has to go up because of inflation, not necessarily because people are choosing and wanting to spend more. But building on that slide that I presented a month or so ago, the very latest wave of that same survey came out just a day or two ago. And once again, shopping was the way in which what was the most common way in which those traveling internationally within Europe said they would tighten their belt or cut back on their expenditure. That doesn't mean to say they will stop shopping altogether. It's just that that is one of those very discretionary elements of a trip. So in a sense, you need to eat and drink. You need to have somewhere to sleep. You want to do stuff that will be memorable whilst you're in the destination. But in a sense, shopping is one of those extras that you can forego when you're on a trip. So it's not surprising. But there are other ways that people are identifying as well, such as perhaps shortening the length of their trip in time, or indeed shortening the geographical length of their trip, so traveling less far, but also being very, very savvy in looking for a type of accommodation that matched their budget, a type of restaurant that matched their budget. So I think when we do come to look at the data for 2023, we will still find that most of the spending is on things such as hotels, restaurants, retail, taxis, all of those visitor attractions. But perhaps the mix of restaurants, the mix of hotels, the mix of attractions may have shifted as people's spending evolves to take account of the squeeze on living standard that they're seeing. But I guess the good news for the industry is that all of the evidence suggests that people are still hugely motivated. They want to travel, they want to go on holiday. It's just that they know that their budget has a limit, so they have to adjust things to allow for that fact.
Absolutely, indeed. So we don't have any more open questions from our audience, so I think we may wish to close there. Shana or Anna, do just give me a wave if you have a closing comment you wish to make. Otherwise, we will say thank you very much for joining us today, Anna, Shana and David. Do please take a look on the Insight Hub, etoa.org/insight. This will be going up there, but there are many other reports and stats up on there. So have a look if you're interested in these, and we hope to see you soon at another one of our sessions. So thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for your time and having us here. Bye-bye.
They're gone. Okay, bye-bye.